Imagine if you took mashed potatoes, but then you made them magical. Hello everyone, welcome back. What I have here is some heavenly, delectable potato gnocchi drizzled with a rich and savory garlic brown butter sage sauce, garnished with some basil from my garden. This dish could end up being your new favorite comfort food. It certainly is mine, and I'm going to show you how to make it, so keep watching. To make gnocchi, you need some starchy potatoes. If you live in the US, some good ones to use that might be available to you are Yukons, russets, or Idaho potatoes, like what I'm using here. And using a paper towel, this will let you know how well you cleaned your potatoes. If when you dry them, the paper towel stays relatively clean, you know you did a good job. So now that our potatoes are washed and dried, now we're going to have to poke holes in them with a fork. This allows the steam to escape while the potato bakes. When making gnocchi, there really aren't any exact measurements. You just need to estimate. I'm using 8 of these Idaho potatoes because for Idaho potatoes, they're really small. But I wanted to have enough potatoes to make enough gnocchi for today, and then have enough to freeze for later. These potatoes here, these weigh about, uncooked, they're a little over a kilo. So that'll kind of maybe give you a frame of reference when you're doing it on your own. Once you've poked holes in your potatoes, salt them generously with kosher salt. Roast your potatoes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 180 degrees Celsius for approximately between 1 and 1.5 hours, however long it takes for the potatoes to become completely tender. The potatoes are done when you can pierce them easily with a fork. Baking them and piercing the skin and putting some salt on the outside to help draw out the moisture. This ensures that these potatoes come out as dry as possible. They may be a little hot to handle, but the easiest time to scoop out the potatoes away from the skin is when they're at their hottest. For this next step, you're going to need this device here. This is called a potato ricer. And we're going to rice the potatoes, but you do want to make sure that before you rice the potatoes that they're cool enough that you can handle them with your bare hands, because we're going to add egg to this and we don't want the egg to cook, which is what will happen if the potatoes are too hot. So let them cool down just a bit before we rice them. Okay, now that our potatoes are cool enough to handle, I've got my nice clean surface here that I'm going to flour. Just so things don't stick. There we go. Nice surface. So we're ricing the potatoes because we want them to stay light and fluffy. It's like a Play-Doh fun factory. Before baking these potatoes, I had roughly a little over a kilo of potatoes. And then after ricing, I ended up with roughly 1 kilo. So for about 1 kilo of riced potato, I'm going to need 1 egg, a little bit of kosher salt, just a pinch. And I'm going to add a bit of freshly ground black pepper. How much you add is entirely up to you. Just add to taste. And roughly 150 grams of flour per kilo of riced potato. And that's not really a strict rule. And like I said before, there are no exact measurements when it comes to making gnocchi. But there's like kind of rough estimates you can go by. Because, I mean, it depends on so many things. It depends on the humidity in the air, what time of year it is, how moist or how waxy the potatoes are, how starchy. So this is really a recipe where you kind of have to go by feel. So we're just going to give it a gentle mix with a bench scraper. That's this thing here. And to keep everything fluffy, just kind of cut in the ingredients and fold, like cut and fold. And then gradually add your flour as you go. And it goes without saying, make sure your hands are super, super clean. Okay, now when kneading gnocchi dough, you just kind of want to just give it like maybe no more than 2 minutes, just to make sure everything sticks together. Now that's a good ball of gnocchi dough, and you can test it by pulling a little bit off and seeing if it at least holds together a little bit, and it does. So now we need to cover this so it doesn't dry out. I'm just going to place it under this bowl right here. But before I do, I'm going to cut into this ball so you can see what we're working with. So there we go. There's our little cross section. So you can see what that looks like. Okay, it's still going to have a little bit of air pockets. You might have some, little uneven bits of potato. You can see the black pepper flakes, and that's all fine. All right, now for the next fun part. Pull out our little bit of dough. Let's see, that might be too big. Let's cut that. So we're going to make ropes with our dough. And roll your rope out till it's about roughly about an inch in diameter, give or take. It's really up to you though. You can expect the gnocchi dough to be a little bit sticky, but if it's way too sticky, then just add a little bit of flour. This should be good though. Okay, cut our nugs. And I like to take each one and then just give it a little roll to kind of even up the morsel. You don't have to do this part. You can skip this part if you want to. But if you are already an advanced gnocchi maker, you may not have to do this step. I, however, am not an advanced gnocchi maker. So sometimes I have to take little extra shortcuts. So help me out. Okay, we have our little collection of nugs here. And now comes the part where the gnocchi get groovy. You can use a fork to make your grooves if you want. Just gently press down on the tines and roll. And that's kind of a really rough, rudimentary gnocco right there. There's another one. If you want, you can do it on the front of the fork. Now, as you can see, I am really not great with rolling gnocchi off a fork. It's not my forte. I'm very clumsy. So, I don't use a fork. What I use instead is this device here. It's called a riga gnocchi. And basically it's like a gnocchi maker with training wheels. Because it's very forgiving. Flour on there. It's kind of hard to mess up with this thing. Like that. Look at that. Look at the difference in the ridges on this one versus the one I made with a fork. The purpose of the ridges is so that the sauce can pool in the ridges and collect the flavor, and then sometimes you can have a gnocco with little indentation there, and that can also help collect sauce. This riga gnocchi is also good for making other ridged type pastas, like malloredus or cavatelli. Sometimes too much flour on the riga gnocchi makes them not want to stick at all. To make the ridges come out good, the gnocchi have to stick a tiny, tiny little bit. I am not a gnocchi making expert, but you don't have to be to make this dish. They don't have to come out perfect because they're still going to be tasty. And once you eat them, you'll be proud of what you did. When laying your gnocchi out, give them a little bit of space between each one so they don't touch. And then here's the important thing. Lay them down so that the ridges are up, so that the ridges don't flatten while they dry. These gnocchi are ready to cook. But if you want to freeze them for later, place them in a single layer on a non-stick surface like I have here. You can use a floured baking sheet or a baking sheet that has some parchment paper on it. I'm using this, it's like a silicone pad or silicone sheet that's non-stick. And you want to make sure that you leave a little space between each gnocco and let them air dry at room temperature for at least an hour until the surface of each gnocco dries out a bit to the touch. Once your gnocchi are dry to the touch, which they are now, transfer the entire baking sheet into the freezer until they are frozen solid. It should take about 45 minutes to an hour. I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to put these in the freezer. I have a batch of gnocchi here that I have already frozen in the freezer. And once they're frozen solid, it's okay if they touch each other. They won't stick anymore. And once this happens, you can transfer your gnocchi into a freezer baggie. And gnocchi will stay good in the freezer for up to a month. Now we are going to make our garlic brown butter sage sauce. I've got some fresh sage from the garden. We're only going to need about a quarter cup of this. You'll need a half a cup or 1 whole stick of butter. If you're using unsalted butter like I am, we're going to add a little bit of salt to it. And we'll need 1 clove from this bunch of garlic. So I'll just take 1 clove out right now. The garlic is really optional. If you don't want to add it to your brown butter sage sauce, you don't have to, but let me tell you something. I love garlic, so we're going to use it. And we'll just crush that garlic right into our saucepan. And let's make sure we get all those good little pieces. more sage. This is a 1/4 cup right here, so I think maybe a few more leaves. Just a couple. Maybe that's enough. Let's see. Let's see what this gets me. Let's check my measurement. I'm going to go ahead and add in a little bit of my salt. Melt the butter together with the garlic over low to medium-low heat. When the butter begins to get slightly bubbly, add the chopped sage and a little freshly ground pepper. Cook for an additional 1 to 2 minutes until the butter has turned very light brown and has a rich, nutty aroma. Now that our sauce is ready, we can cook the gnocchi. Bring a pot of lightly salted water to a boil and drop in the gnocchi. And cook for about 3 to 5 minutes or until the gnocchi rise to the top. Drain the gnocchi and drizzle the garlic brown butter sage sauce over the top. If you wish, you can grate a bit of Parmesan cheese over the top and garnish with fresh basil. Buon appetito! It's good. It's, oh my goodness, it's delicious. It's like, it tastes like the taste equivalent of a warm hug. Each gnocco dumpling is soft and pillowy, and it's got a wonderful texture. That brown butter sage sauce, it just gives like a hint of like a caramel flavor with a little bit of sweetness, and it just, oh, it's wonderful. And the sage mixed with the butter and the garlic and that little bit of basil at the top. Oh my goodness. Oh, here's some with a piece of basil on it. That's ridiculous how good this is. Well, that wraps up this video for today. Some of the items that I used in this video, such as the potato ricer, the riga gnocchi, and some of the items I used, I will put in my Amazon store if you want to check them out for yourself. The link will be down below in the description. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to get the scoop on new and upcoming videos. Stay safe and ci vediamo presto. Ciao for now. Mwah.